What's going on, guys? It's Brandon back here again today with another season preview. Again, my apologies. I was very busy yesterday, couldn't get this one up in time, so we'll have two done today. The Toronto Maple Leafs, their GM, Brad Treliving, going into year 3 as the Toronto Maple Leafs general manager. And then their coach, Craig Berube, is going into year 2 since he took over for Sheldon Keefe following the 2024 season. Can't really complain about either job they've done. They finished top 10, well, I guess for 5 years in a row now, but in Treliving and Berube's careers, they finished top 10 every single year. So, starting with the top line, there's some big changes with the Toronto Maple Leafs offense this season. Matthew Knies is that top line left winger, $7.75 million until 2031. Austin Matthews, $13.25 million until 2028. And William Nylander, $11.5 million until 2032. So that's your new really big three up front. Max Domi on the second line, $3.75 million until 2028. John Tavares, $11 million cap hit is over. It's now $4.389 million until 2029, which for Tavares is a pretty good deal. Then you have Maccelli, who they acquired from Utah, $3.425 million until 2026, where he will be an RFA. Third line, you have Bobby McMann, $1.35 million until 2026. Nick Waugh, who they acquired from Vegas for he who we'll talk about later, $3 million until 2027. Yarncroke, $2.1 million until 2026. And on the fourth line, they acquired Dakota Joshua from Vancouver, $3.25 million until 2028. Scott Laughton, who they got at the deadline last year, $1.5 million until 2026. And Steven Lorentz, $1.35 million until 2028. Looking at their depth, David Kampf, $2.4 million until 2027. That is a contract they will look to move, I presume. You also have Nick Robertson, $1.85 million until 2026, where he will be an RFA. Once again, this is a yearly thing with Robertson. You have Pezzetta, you have Lettieri, you have Boyd. And then their two younger guys you got to be looking for is Easton Cowan, who's an RFA in 2028, and then Holenko, who's also an RFA in 2028. Younger names to watch on this team. Toronto's done a good job of replacing some of their older players with younger players from within. That's something I've really liked about them. Although their defense, none of them besides one, I think, are homegrown. Looking at their defense, you have McCabe and Tanev on the top pair. McCabe, $4.513 million until 2030, and then Tanev, $4.5 million until 2030. Then you have Riley, $7.5 million until 2030. Carlo, who they acquired at the deadline as well last trade deadline, $3.485 million until 2027. You have Benoit, surprising hero of the 2025 playoffs, $1.35 million until 2027, and then Ekman Larson, $3.5 million going into 2028. His career has been rejuvenated since he was with Florida. Looking at the defensive depth, you have Thrun, who they acquired from San Jose, $1 million until 2026, where he will be an RFA. So that's a very good seventh defenseman right there. You also have Philippe Myers, Dakota Mermis, Matt Benning, who's got $1.25 million cap hit until 2026. Weber is an RFA in 2027. Villeneuve, who's a RFA in 2026. And a recent draft pick in Ben Danford, who's an RFA in 2028. So a little bit of youth coming through. They have the depth. And that's something that Toronto really struggled with early on. I think they've rectified that. Then you have Stolarz, $2.5 million to be your starting goaltender till 2026. He will likely get an extension. You also have Joseph Woll, $3.666 million until 2028. Defense on the depth side, you have Hildeby as your third goaltender, who's an RFA in 2028. Other than that, not too much behind the pipe or in the pipes. So looking at their total list of additions, Maccelli, Waugh, Joshua, Thrun, Pezzetta, Boyd, and Lettieri, the most notable. The subtractions, of course, the big one is Mitch Marner. How is this team going to be without their top point scorer in the lineup? He had 102 points last year. All due respect, I don't think Nick Waugh is going to score 102 points next year. So where that scoring is going to come from, it's going to be relying on Knies to step it up, Nylander, to Matthews, Domi, Tavares, Maccelli, that top six to really elevate to the next level. And so for Marner, well, I think he was good for the lineup, but hearing all the controversy, it was definitely time, I think, for a change in relationship for Mitch Marner. You also have Holmberg, who went to Tampa Bay. Pacioretty is still unsigned. Who knows if he does sign or maybe he'll retire. Ryan Reeves was traded to San Jose for Henry Thrun to free up some cap space. Alex Steves and Matt Murray So Murray goes to Seattle. Steves, I believe he went to Florida to be depth, if I remember correctly, but I don't. There's a lot of teams that, maybe Tampa Bay, I don't know. So that's their team. And overall, I think it's a solid team. A team that's a top 3 team in the division. Absolutely. They have a very strong 4 lines. Defensively, they can roll all 3 pairs. Goaltenders, you can go 1A, 1B with Stolarz and Wall. And Stolarz was one of the best goaltenders in the league last year until he got hurt in the second round of the playoffs. Now, looking at their playoff history, I feel like I can do this entire segment just by being silent. We'll start off by looking at them in the division this year. They finished first in the division this year in 2025. Only the second time they finished first in their division in this entire time span. From 2004, when they won their they lost that second round series against Philadelphia. They did not win another playoff series until 2023. That's 19 years. Within that, they missed the playoffs by 2 points, by 1 point on the last day of the season. 2013, of course, they lose in Game 7 against Boston after being up 4-1. Everyone knows the story. That's the only time in the playoffs in between then and 2017. They go into a rebuild for a quick 3 years. They end up getting Matthews and Marner and Nylander and all these high draft picks. And that's a restart in 2017. 2016-17, right after they draft Matthews, no one expects them to really be in the playoffs, but here they are, a very young team going into the playoffs. 40, 27, and 15 for 95 points for 13th in the league, and they've never been lower since. 28. So there's a reason there's a line there. That's the rookie year. That's now we made it back to the playoffs. Now there's expectations on us. 2018, 49, 26, and 7, 105 points for 7th in the league. Of course, 2017 they lose in 6 to Washington, where 5 of the games go to overtime. 2018 they're down 3-1 to Boston, and just like 2013, they come back. Game 7 they're up in the third period, and Boston comes back and beats them. 2019, they signed Tavares. It's this really big deal. And then 46, 28, and 8 record, 100 points for 7th in the league once again. And they come back up against Boston again, and they say, this is the year. 3rd time's the charm against Boston. They go up 3-2 on Boston, and then Boston fights back. They win Game 6 and just dominate Game 7. 2020, the COVID-shortened season. 36, 25, and 9. They were having a bit of struggles that year where they let go of Babcock. They hired Sheldon Keefe. 81 points, 12th in the league that year at the time of the pause. In the qualifying round, they were the 8th seed. They play the number 9 seeded Columbus Blue Jackets. They lose in the equivalent of 7 games. They lose in 5, 3-2, in a really wacky series where there was 3-0 comebacks on both sides. And then in Game 5, Columbus just shut the door and didn't allow them to score. And that's the end of what I would consider the not contenders era, but the era like they're a playoff team, but is this team going to be able to get over the hump, or is this team good enough in the regular season to get at home ice advantage? Because aside from 2020, they did not have home ice advantage, and 2020 was the bubble, so put an asterisk on that. 2021, they play in their own Canadian division, the North Division. So start of a new era here. 35, 14, and 7. 77 points. They win the division. Everyone expects them to go to the conference final. They're 6th in the league. Best Canadian team by a mile. They're up 3-1 on Montreal. And Tavares goes down in Game 1. They still fight. They win. And then Montreal wins Game 5 in overtime, wins Game 6 in overtime, and Game 7, Carey Price shuts the door. And Montreal wins that series in 7 games. So loss in 6, loss in 7, loss in 7. Basically lost in 7, but lost in 5. Lost in 7, and it's not over yet. 2022, we're back to normalcy. 54, 21, and 7 record, 115 points for 4th in the league. They come across the two-time defending champion Tampa Bay Lightning in the first round. They're up 3-2. They lose Game 6 in overtime. Game 7, they lose 2-1. And they're out in 7 games once again. And at this point, it's become a soap opera. 2023, 50, 21, and 11, 111 points for 5th in the league that year. They play Tampa in the first round again. And after 3 overtime wins in Tampa, they win that series in 6 games. Because everyone knew if it went 7 back to Toronto, Tampa was winning it. So they win that series in 6. They come across Florida in the second round. And they might as well have just lost in 7 in the first round because Florida demolishes them. Florida, a very good wildcard team on their way to the Stanley Cup final where they would lose to Vegas. They go up 3-0. Toronto wins Game 4, but Florida wins in 5. 2024, 46, 26, and 10 for 102 points, which is 10th. Lowest they've been since 2020, but still a good team. They play Boston in the first round for the first time since 2019. And this is the year. This is the year they're finally going to beat their demons. I predicted them to beat Boston this season. They go down 3-1, like 2013, like 2018. They come back from games 5 and 6. They are in game 7. They have a lead in game 7, and they lose in overtime. They lost in overtime just like 2013. Pasternak got a beautiful play by Hampus Lindholm early in overtime. So they're out in 7 once again. 7-7-7. Still deciding games, or 7-7. Still a deciding game, so 7 asterisks. 7-7-7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 game 7 losses in the first round. 2025, 52, 26, and 4 record, 108 points for 4th in the league. They win their first round series against, it was Ottawa, because Toronto owns Ottawa in the playoffs, so that's not been in question. They're up 3-0. They lose game 4 and 5, but they win in 6. They come across Florida in the second round. Again, they win the first 2 games at home. They're up 3-1 in game 3. Florida ties it, goes to overtime, and that was it. I knew right then and there Florida won the series in game 3 because that's just something that kills Toronto. Of course, they lose game 4 and game 5. They win game 6 to force game 7. Games 5 and 7 on home ice, they lose 6-1 in both. So, embarrassed at home, and they're still asking the same questions of what can we do to get over that hump. You've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 straight years in the playoffs, 2 series wins, and the farthest you've gone is game 7 of the second round. It's not good enough, and maybe with the change of Marner, we'll see a difference in the team's playoff aspirations and playoff goals. But we'll see. Of course, they finished first in the division this season. I don't think they'll finish first this season just with the loss of Marner, a great regular season player, not necessarily the greatest playoff player. But they should be in the top 3 along with Tampa and Florida without question. Anyway, guys, let me know down in the comments what you think Toronto is going to do this season, how they'll perform, what they'll be like without Marner, and what will they do in the playoffs this season. Anyway, guys, thank you all so much for watching this video, and I shall see you all in the next one. Have a good one.